Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Presenting travel writer and sacred mysterious site hunter, Teal Gray.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Teal Gray. Tonight, we are going to have a great show. We are coming to you live on WBHM-DB radio out of Birmingham, Alabama. You have been listening to us under my heading of Paramysteries, but we are going to change that format to my other podcast that I love and have had for years, and it's going to be Soul to Soul with Teal Gray from now on. So thanks for making that leap with us. We're still going to have the same great content that you love, but we're going to expand it even further into the body, mind, and soul than you may have been used to. So stick with us and find out everything we have in store for you. Now tonight, this takes me back to some wonderful memories. We all have them of the Wild West, the television shows and the movies. And one of the most popular outlaws of the day was always my favorite, Jesse James. And my daughter, Tiffany, and I had, she's a historian, and we went and visited Jesse James' childhood home in Kearney, Missouri. And so it was just amazing to be there, and it was so beautifully cared for. So I must say, definitely go there and visit if you can. There's several associated with him, and we'll talk to his relatives tonight about that. But we walked out past where the houses were, the pastures. I could just imagine as we were standing there back close to the woods and the hills, you could imagine the boys riding fast through the woods to get back home after one of their great robberies. And tonight, when my daughter knew I was going to do the show, she said, Mom, one of my favorite quotes is actually from Jesse James. And I said, really? And she said, yes. He said, "We were rough men, but we never raped a woman. We never robbed the honest poor. And when we rode into a town, everybody knew our business." And I thought, that's beautiful because, that was so true to them. And that's why I think people were always so loyal to them, was because they had high moral standards. I mean, they just did. And I always respected them for that. Now, tonight, we have very special guests here. Dan and Teresa Duke. They're the great-great-grandchildren of Jesse James. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having us on.
Thrilled. Now, you grew up, of course, surrounded by family stories of outlaws and treasures. And we're going to be talking about that tonight firsthand. Your books, Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasures, and also The Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James. Can you guys introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah.
I'll let Teresa first.
Okay. My name is Teresa, and me and Danny wrote the Mysterious Life and Fake Death of Jesse James. We started off helping our mother do the research because she heard about it all throughout her life. And then when she passed away, we both made a vow to help her. To continue on the research, where she left off. And we've spent a good chunk of our lives doing the research.
And your mother, if I'm not wrong, she had 3 books that she wrote about Jesse James, right?
Yep,
That's
correct.
That's true.
She wrote 3 books, and then we continued on. So we're just continuing on and just seeing where this will take us. But it's been wonderful. It's just been exciting. It's just been really fun.
I bet it has. I mean, and how, I mean, it's, just as the average person growing up, this was such an interesting subject. And, Teresa, I know you did, both of you guys, Dan and Teresa, you both have been researching for decades on top of your mother's work. And Teresa, you found out some very interesting research yourself that I want you to talk about. And find out some of your favorite findings and some that, kind of turned history on its head, I think. So that's interesting. And Dan, I want to talk to you also about the first book, The Treasures Jesse James was involved with, and the Freemasons. And I understand that you're a Freemason as well now.
Yes, I am. I'm
That's
a
wonderful.
Master Mason.
Was that something that, as growing up as part of a legacy from Jesse, is that something that you kind of yearn to join from that legacy?
That was one of the reasons, and there was an elderly gentleman who, when he was a child, he knew Jesse when Jesse was an old man, and he was a Mason, and he played an important role in part of quite a few parts of the treasure side of the story, and he was a real good man. Every Mason I'd met in relation with our research had always been good men, and but my research also pushed me further towards the door of Masonry.
It's very interesting. It's really, and of course, I'm a big, follower of the Knights Templar, and I've studied, under the Rosicrucians, so that's interesting to me as well.
Oh wow! Yeah,
it's a lot.
That's fascinating.
There's a lot of levels to it. That we won't get into on air, but it's it's such an old art. I'm an ordained minister. You might not know that, but so I follow all religions and ancient beliefs, and because I feel like you have to know everything. So I'm always a curious cat, learning as much as I can about everything. And it's the symbolism and everything that is talked about in your books. It's something that I think most people walk by things and carvings and symbols, and they have no idea that the very fabric of our country, even our monetary notes, and many more things, our Capitol buildings, all these things, that very much so are steeped in these ancient knowledges and symbolisms. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh yeah,
I agree.
Deeply rooted, that's for sure.
And it's at the highest levels. I think some people think that it's so esoteric, it's something that's hidden, but quite honestly, from my understanding, it's at the highest levels of government, the highest levels, even in the church, the Vatican, everything is they're all in on it. They might not say that, but they're all part of it.
Oh yeah.
So tell me about what made you decide with the first book, Dan, to go ahead and put it all out there, because it's a lot to do, and also you're letting out a few secrets here and there, but what was it, just time to tell the story?
It came with a big change of heart. Throughout the years, I researching in the beginning, there was a treasure map that had been passed down through the family, and we had the treasure map. We ended up with it, and I wanted to find it. Who wouldn't want to find the treasure? But
right.
At most, I expected it to be nothing more than maybe maybe a jar of gold or silver coins, or a saddlebag with some coins in it. And that's the most I expected. And as I kept researching, I found out the treasures, and from firsthand accounts, like the elderly gentleman I mentioned earlier, his name was George Roaming. When he was 10, Jesse hired George he swore him to secrecy. He had to swear an oath of secrecy, and he hired George to help him move 700 bars of gold. That's more gold, and each bar weighed approximately 15 pounds. So, and that's more gold than the James gang had ever been credited with robbing. So I wondered, where to get all this gold, and then it just kept getting larger. The former Attorney General of the state of Texas, Wagner Carr, was also interested in Jesse and the gold associated with him, and he had talked to our mother quite a bit, and he ended up they became friends, and he sent his driver to show me and my mother where several very large catches of gold had been recovered. And so, with George had drawn a map before he died for us, and locating it. He wanted a part of it. He wanted us to. He wanted but he wanted us to have it. He told my mother he felt that it was part of her heritage and that she deserved it. So we went out to look for it, and he pinpointed right where it was. We didn't realize until we got there it's on Fort Hood Military Reservation, and so there was no way we were going to get that. But it helped. And I'm trying to keep from going down a rabbit hole with this, but George's information and the information given by the Wagner Carr, the former Attorney General for Texas, that well, when they told us where they were, it helped me pinpoint it, and everything started lining up. But to get back to the main question, and I apologize for running off on that.
No, I love it.
All right, thanks. Well, yeah, at first I wanted it, who wouldn't want a bunch of gold? And I had all kinds of visions, things I wanted in life that you could easily buy with that much gold. And then after more and more research, our mother passed away. I kept researching and decided to write the book. But right before I decided to write the book, I'd realized that it was meant for a much greater purpose. And I don't believe America would be the United States of America today if it hadn't been for those men, and I believe Freemasons and other groups, possibly the Rosicrucians, if they hadn't buried the treasures. I think the treasures were meant to found the United States, and it goes back to Sir Francis Bacon, and his book, The New Atlantis, was one key for me. I believe that was a template for the formation of a free country where people could speak their minds and worship as they chose. And anyway, that's what changed my mind about all of that. It was a big turning point for me.
Yeah, it's a higher purpose even, I respect that. So what was it like for you guys growing up and hearing these stories and sort of knowing that, wow, we're related to Jesse James, and you couldn't probably turn around twice without, having a television show, a special, a documentary pop up. I mean, that had to bring would bring me a sense of pride.
Oh yeah.
We were proud.
Yeah. I remember going to, when I was in elementary, I'd tell all my friends I'm related to Jesse James. And, it did it did instill you with pride. It was nice.
Yeah. And, some people will say, well, Teal, they were outlaws. They were. And I understand that. However, again, they were robbing banks. They were quite specific, banks and trains. This wasn't where you had to be afraid of them walking down the street. They were not going to hurt you. They might stuff some money in your pocket if you really needed it. But I think it wasn't just that general outlaw. They were quite specific, right?
They were very specific, and they had a much larger network than most people realize, because they seemed to know what was on which train. They knew which gold or how much gold was on the train, where the shipment was, and when it was going to be there. So they had to have people on the inside tipping them off.
Right, at the highest levels, really, because they didn't let that knowledge out, especially back then. For the very reason, security.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now tell us a little bit, Dan, about how it connects with the treasures of the Knights Templar and all that. How do they fit into that? Because that's something that's new to most people that I've ever talked to. They're like, can't wait for the show because they didn't understand the Knight Templar connection.
That's true. There's and it shocked me just as much as it would most people. Researching Jesse, a lot of the treasure legends were alleged to have been connected to a group called the Knights of the Golden Circle, who a lot of people just refer to as the acronym KGC. But and I had no reason to doubt that. The Knights of the Golden Circle were a secret Confederate organization who during the Civil War, their role was to slow and or basically harass the Union forces and slow their movements. But after the Civil War, they supposedly changed their goals to gaining enough wealth any way they could to fund a second Civil War. And I thought, well, that makes sense. It's just like two football teams who are right. Oh, did I just drop off or?
No, you're good.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But yeah, it reminded me of two rival football teams. One side loses, they want another shot. That's just human nature. And I thought, well, it makes sense. I had no reason to doubt it. But then I started tracking down treasures that were alleged to have been Knights of the Golden Circle treasures. And these treasures like Victoria Peak in New Mexico, Williamsburg, Virginia, at the Bruton Parish Vault, which connects with Manly Palmer Hall's wife, Marie Bauer Hall. All these treasure sites predated the formation or the existence of the Knights of the Golden Circle by centuries in some cases. So, I thought, okay, there has to be another group involved with this, but if they weren't here, they couldn't have done this. The Knights of the Golden Circle weren't in existence at that time, so there's no way they could have put the treasures there. And so reading further into it, I knew that Albert Pike had been in the same areas and even in the same camps with the same group that Jesse rode with during the Civil War. And I thought, well, maybe he's got something to do with it. And I started looking into every book he'd written, and like Morals and Dogma, for example, written by Albert Pike. He'd mentioned a lot about Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and just different esoteric topics. So I ended up going down that trail, and it opened a huge door for me. It led back through the founding fathers, Freemasonry, people who had this. It was almost like doing a family tree only for an organization. And I went back through the founding fathers, and I wanted to find out who was responsible for this. And when I came to Sir Francis Bacon, I thought, this is the guy. It has to be the guy. Manly Palmer Hall's wife, Marie Bauer Hall, had written about the same thing. She had proven that a treasure of some kind exists in Williamsburg, Virginia. And people had ridiculed her, said she was crazy, and she proved them wrong when she found the original foundations of a church they said never existed. So I had no reason. And she used the way she found that was by decoding anagrams on tombstones in the church and ciphers in the works of Shakespeare, which she tied back to Francis Bacon. And I thought, okay, this guy he's got to be the guy. And I was satisfied until I started digging into people surrounding him. And it went further back through his mentor, John Dee, who was known as the original 007. And to make a long story short, it went through different alchemists, enlightened minds of the Renaissance period, through rabbis, all the way back to a rabbi named Rashi, who was known as Rashi, and he was the favored court guest of Hugh de Champagne, one of the founders of the Knights Templar. And I thought, okay, as far as I can tell, it might sound crazy to people, but it seems, it's right there. It seems to fit all the pieces of the puzzle. And I knew when the book came out, I thought people are going to think I'm insane. But the thing that made my whole decade was the guy, one of the men who wrote a glowing endorsement for my book was Timothy Hogan, who was the current Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And he had stated that I was on the right track, basically.
That's amazing. Wow. That's one of those things that just makes your head open up and sort of explode, right? We're going to stop, Dan, for a minute. We're going to have to
Okay.
go and hear from our sponsors, but we will be right back on Soul to Soul with Teal Gray. Our guests are Dan and Teresa Duke. We'll be back in just a minute, and we're going to go hear from our sponsors. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama. Since 1948, Fate Magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
This is Jason Bland, host of Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup, where we stream live as a webcast every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, with guests who will blow your mind. Live ghost box sessions where you can call into the show to see if the spirits will talk to you, and the world wide web of weird with the latest in paranormal news and evidence. We're bringing the weird every Sunday night, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back. Tonight we are going to talk to you with Dan and Teresa Duke. They are the great-great-grandchildren of Jesse James. We're coming to you live on WBHM-DB radio from Birmingham, Alabama with them. So, Dan, when we left for break, we were talking a bit about the symbolism and how it ties in with the Knights Templar and just the amazing finds that come from that knowledge, that deep, knowledge of the symbols. And wanted to let you finish your thoughts on that because we had to stop you before.
Oh, yeah. It was, I'm trying. There's so many different ways to go on that one. Well, Kabbalah I had mentioned. Before that, I had mentioned when we left off, Rashi. I traced it back to the founder of the Knights Templar, and according to Timothy Hogan, the current Grand Master of the Templar, he said, well, a lot of people view the Templar as being part of the Crusaders. Going in just basically robbing and pillaging the Middle East. Seems a lot of people misunderstand that.
Yeah.
That's true, and according to Timothy Hogan, and he's a very good researcher. He's an author himself. He had explained and shown how the Templar had known, they had seen the war coming. They knew it was unavoidable. It was going to happen, whether they were there or not. But they knew there were a lot. They knew what happened during war, and they had friends like Rashi, who was a very important, and he's a legendary rabbi himself. But they knew what was coming, war was coming, and they needed to protect holy relics, and not just Christian relics. It was also Jewish relics and
Right.
items of religious and historical importance, and also from people like us, the Druze tradition and Sufi mystics.
Mhm.
And that amazed me. I had never known that until I'd
Yeah,
read a lot of Timothy Hogan stuff.
I want to say, Dan, that so many people don't realize because they think everything is compartmentalized. That's something that's a modern day compartmentalization for religion and for esoteric studies. In the back in the day, the farther you go back, the less it was separate. It was integrated, and they understood each other's views, and they integrated things, and that's how they preserve so much of that ancient history, because the first thing to do, as you know, in war and conquering, is they wipe out any of the records or any of the relics that pertain to you, because then in a generation or two, the memory's there, right? So
exactly,
you make that connection, because really, I'm telling you, so many people don't understand that. And I love that it's connected in your book. So congratulations, really, that's quite a leap.
Thank
and
you.
I'm glad you made it.
Thank you. And I give that credit to Timothy Hogan for pointing that out. I had no idea. There was, when I was researching and I found that out, it blew my mind. At first I thought this can't be. And then I started digging into sources that he had cited and other people, and I found out it was true.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me. The world was they were a lot more open-minded, it seemed, in some areas than people are today.
They were. I mean, you could have your differences of opinion, but you were able to share that, right? It was something that. And that first book, let's tell everybody again, just to make sure that I got it right. Let everybody know the titles of your book and your and Teresa's books, and where they can find those, Dan. We're going to wrap it up again later, but I just want people who might be searching right now to be able to look it up.
Okay, yeah. My first book is Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure. And the second book that Teresa and I had written is The Mysterious Life and Faked Death of Jesse James. And that both those books can be found at innertraditions.com or anywhere books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all those places, except maybe in North Korea. So I always throw that
and that's going to be coming soon, right?
Yeah.
You can't miss it. So, and I'm sure you guys have another book up your sleeves.
Yes, we do. Several.
Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to it. Now, Teresa, I want to turn to you for a moment. Can you speak to us a little bit about you've had some mind-blowing discoveries too during your, digging and researching over decades. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, or what maybe some of your favorite finds or maybe your most astonishing?
Yeah, there's just, there's been so many so many interesting things that we found, but I want to say, I found a picture when my mom passed away. I was just driven to continue to find something. I wanted to find anything just to, continue the research. And it happened. It seemed like it just kind of fell in my lap, but I found a picture showing where Jesse James attended the funeral of the fake Jesse James. So he was actually at his own funeral, kind of like the last joke, like, hey, this is the last joke to everyone. But I found that it was a picture of him standing with his mother, and Frank James was in the picture as well, his brother. So that was really cool, because there were always rumors out there that he attended his own funeral. And we needed proof, and I actually found that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was. It sent chills down my spine. It's like it just kind of landed in my lap. But I think the main one that was really funny for me was one day I was researching the journal Jesse James's journal, and I was telling my mom, we were reading it. I said, if I could just, why didn't he just write? Because he went under the alias James Lafitte Courtney, and I was like, why can't you just put, hey, here's Jesse James? If we could just find that in his journal, I would love that. Why, it would make it so easy. Well, literally not 10 minutes later, I found his signature, J. James, in the journal. And I came to Mom, and I was almost crying because I was so excited. He actually had it, scribbled in there, J. James. And I said, I can't believe this, Mom, but here it is, J. James.
Yeah.
So I think that's my favorite find because I got to share that moment with my mom, and we were both really excited about it. So,
Teresa, that really speaks to so many people that are historians and researchers. They have told me through the years that when they're really desperate, like, gosh, I really need to find this, or I would love to know this, that it's almost spooky how then that very thing appears, just like that moment you shared with your mom. I mean, you looked at research and she had researched for decades, but only in that moment of asking, it sort of appears.
Yeah, it's literally like 10 minutes later. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. And I got to ask you both, through your research and the books and all of this, have you felt the presence of Jesse with you?
Oh, yeah. There have been moments when we were all discussing, we would all be sitting around discussing everything, and we definitely felt like a strong presence, like he was there.
It often felt like an electric charge in the air.
Yep.
It was hard to describe other than just an electric charge.
Yeah.
And do you guys, I would think he would be so pleased, so proud of the way that you've brought an illumination to his legacy, more than just the black and white, TV shows of the 60s or the 70s, whatever decades, in many decades. And I just think he would really be proud of you, Tim.
Thank you.
Well,
I sure hope.
Thank you.
I really hope we made him proud. We wanted to show that he wasn't just, just some bank robber out robbing people. We wanted to kind of, as you said, illuminate everyone to that it was like a higher purpose. He was in it with a purpose.
I just always felt that you could sort of set him apart. And absolutely with your books, that it's true. So that, I think that's really interesting. And I tell you, standing at the old Homestead was really amazing because I could just see those boys riding fast down those hills to make it back home. It was
quite
an adventurous life.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's almost a magical feel about the farm where they grew up.
Yeah, and to walk where they walk, it is like a magical feeling almost. It's just amazing.
And you go through the museum, I have to say, in Kearney is for the the Homestead is so well done, and the people are so friendly and so welcoming. But and just as you go through, and you're alone in those rooms, and it's their actual items there, you can feel the different energies and attached to it. But it's beautiful. It's a great feeling. It's not a feeling of foreboding or anything dark or anything. And I think that's because he wasn't a dark person. He was a bank robber, but with a purpose, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, so what do you think you would want to tell the audience is maybe each of your things that you've taken away from all these decades of research that might be something they either don't know or something that might just make them go, oh, couldn't have thought that about Jesse James. That's nice. That illuminates him and puts him in a different league in my mind.
Well, for me, one of many really cool aspects of Jesse, in his diary, for example, he mentioned he put the date in every town he was in. He and his gang went from Blevins, Texas, through Longview, Texas, all the way to Shreveport, and then down the Red River on a steamship, the Amelia LaBarge. And they went to Natchitoches, and after they got to Natchitoches, they got off the steamship, went into Louisiana, and headed back north, the opposite direction they just traveled. And they stopped at the house of a man named Gervais Fontenot. And I thought, well, I wanted to know more about Gervais. So I started, I'd researched Gervais, and I found out he was the nephew of the pirate Jean Lafitte. And I thought, whoa, this is amazing. Jesse James and his gang stop at Jean Lafitte's nephew's house. And I thought, why would they do that? And I think, well, Lafitte, who was a pirate, we all know the Templar were also pirates. Lafitte had been quoted by some people as stating that his grandmother was a Jewess who had suffered in the Inquisitions, and he had a beef with the Catholic Church at the time, and or for most of his life, I'm sure. But or that was his excuse anyway. But not just that. When Lafitte helped the United States win the Battle of New Orleans. And the interesting thing to me, one of the many clues, was that Lafitte had Masonic communications with Andrew Jackson, the former president Andrew Jackson. It was before he was president. Andrew Jackson was a general at the time. And you can't have Masonic communications unless you're a Freemason. Mm-hmm. So it just ties in that Freemason link to in other areas to Jean Lafitte. And there are tons of legends of buried treasure surrounding Lafitte. And I think his treasures were probably also located on the same template that I had discovered.
That's really interesting. I have a pirate relative, Long John, and but anyway, neither here nor there. But
that's cool.
Pirates are pretty fascinating people, but because yes, they're pirates, but also many times they were part of, as you're saying, government movements and changing times of nations. They're on the
end. True.
Part of what's going on.
Well, one nation branded him a pirate, another nation called him a privateer. So it was whoever he was pirating. I get he was the bad guy in their eyes, but he helped the United States. So
yeah,
so he was a good guy.
Kind of like, whose side are you on?
Exactly. Like my mother had pointed out one time, one man's hero is another man's terrorist, basically.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean,
and that's that case all through history.
Yeah, and in religions, it's the same thing. You think that your God or who you worship is the ultimate, and you're saving everybody. But when they come in, when we would come in to certain places to try to help people, honestly trying to help them, they didn't realize that, and there was war around them and everything, and what they saw was not necessarily help. They were, asking and pleading for help from us. So it really does depend on which side of the battle you're happening to be on. And so, Teresa, I'm going to let you answer the same question. What would you say is something you want to tell the world about Jesse James?
Well, I know that I think the one thing I really want to get out is that, he was this bold and daring, almost infamous or famous, however you look at it, person to history. But, we really grew to love him as just him, just him, like without history even knowing that he loved his family. He would do anything for his kids. Even the kids who didn't treat him so well, some of his kids were just after his own money, and he continued to let them all live on his property, and he'd buy them cars, and he was a good man. So I think, to me, just knowing he was a good family man, um, speaks volumes about his values and just him as a person. So I think that's what I would like to get out. He was a good family person.
Yeah, I love that about him. My daughter's a historian, like I said before, and she spoke about that. She's like, he was known for really loving his family, loving his kids, and
Yeah.
when people in dire need, they could come to him and confide
Yep.
in him, ask for help. That's a great quality. That's a really good
Yeah.
quality.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Well, everybody, we're going to have to break again, but we will be right back after we hear from our sponsors. And again, you're listening to us from WBHM-DB Radio, Birmingham, Alabama. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
We are back with you tonight on Soul to Soul with Teal Gray. We have been talking with Dan and Teresa Duke. We are now going to have a very fitting special segment from Tui Snyder. And Tui, do I have this right? Are you going to tell us about the Santa Claus bank robber?
I sure am. And I'm just cracking up because of the synchronicity here. When you invited me to be on the show, I just thought, well, it's December. This is perfect. I'll talk about the Santa Claus bank robber. I had no idea you're gonna have these wonderful guests talking about Jesse James. So that is just such a perfect little segue. And I have to admit, it really does tie in because my views of the Wild West and bank robberies were, as a kid, you cut your teeth on all the Hollywood movies. I had a very Western movie version of what bank robberies were all about. So when I first heard that the largest manhunt to date in Texas was for none other than Santa Claus, I assumed it was going to be set in frontier times. But instead, it actually took place in 1927. And that is because in the 20s, here in Texas and throughout the Southwest and America in general, but in Texas specifically, we were having 3 to 4 bank robberies every single day. And this really was upsetting to law enforcement, of course, and to the banks, of course. And so the Texas Banking Association they said, you know what? They already had a robber bounty, wanted, dead or alive, $500 reward. That seemed like a lot of money. Well, in 1927, they upped it to $5,000 per bank robber. But here's the catch. You know how in the movies you always see wanted, dead or alive? They kind of got rid of the or alive part, and they created the dead bank robber reward. And, and yeah, I've seen the posters, and it's great. It says, we will pay $5,000 per dead bank robber. We will not pay one. Yeah,
we don't want to feed them. We don't want to house them. We just want to bury them.
I know, and then and then it goes on. We will not pay 1 red cent for a live bank robber, as if you didn't get it already. So they really wanted you to know, like, serve them up dead, warm maybe, but just kill them in the act of robbing a bank. And just to put this money into perspective, the average income in the 20s, annual income, was about $1,500, let's say. So to be offered $5,000 per bank robber, you can see where people would be getting dollar signs in their eyes. I mean, when I was researching this, there were people who definitely did stuff like, hey, Joe, stand in front of the bank holding this money, and then they shoot him. I mean, it's pretty much as bad as that. Yeah. So in Cisco, Texas, I know it's one of those things. I got to say, people write me all the time and they're like, I laughed all the way through I know there was a crime going on. I know bad stuff happened, but like, I laughed out loud throughout your book. And I'm like, I know, I was like laughing because it's kind of a comedy of errors, everything that happened. So in 1927 in Cisco, Texas, there was a local bad boy who thought, I know a really easy peasy bank to rob, but if I dress like Santa, no one's going to recognize me. And so he got three of his buddies to help him, and they weren't locals, but everybody knew Marshall Ratliff. He was, like I said, a local bad boy. He'd already served time for bank robbery. So he thought, great, he's walking down the street dressed like Santa. Again, as you read the book, you'll be like, what could go wrong? Of course, when you're dressed like Santa, who are you going to attract? Little kids. Well, one of them followed him into the bank, and with her mom. And this is what made their whole plan unravel, because she ran out of the bank, ran 1 block over where the police station was. So that was like not the best thinking on their part. And it's a good thing she left when she did, because there was this huge shootout. And it was 15 minutes with at least conservative estimate of 200 shots fired in that 15 minutes. Now, there were only 3 law officials. There was only 3 cops in town. Everybody else shooting had gone to the local hardware store where they were just handing out guns, going, go shoot yourselves, a bank robber, boys. Maybe you can get $5,000 per, And I got this quote in my book, which I love. It's from a guy named Goober Keys, saying how he was in high school and 3 of his buddies went into Collins Hardware, and they just were handed guns. Now, the trouble with that was these were the new guns, and people weren't familiar with them. And of course, the cops were doing their best to wait until they got a clear shot and do the things you do when you're trained, right? Well, the locals are just, like I said, thinking ka-ching, ka-ching. And so people were either running away from the bank or running to the bank. And it's lucky that not more people were shot. People were getting shot. They were shooting themselves by mistake. They couldn't figure out how to use the guns because they had just gotten them from the hardware store.
This might be where the word fiasco comes into play.
Oh my goodness. It's just, and really seriously, it is such a crazy tale. I thought I was just going to write an article about it, and it expanded into a book because it at one point they do a carjacking, and then they transfer everybody over. They realize they don't have the car keys, so they transfer everything back except for the money. So then they're driving out of town without the money. And then that night, I know, and I'm really condensing it here, but it's just it's a wild ride. And I was glad I wasn't the only one snickering at times. Although I do have to say, I really grew to have an affection for these boys too. I mean, these 4 men, they made one stupid mistake after another, but I can really relate to how you do get a true affection for them. And the most you do. And I was so happy. I had a little email exchange with one of the granddaughters of one of the bandit who's portrayed as being the toughest fella. And as I was doing research, I kept getting this feeling that he was some sort of softy on the inside. And I'm like, I don't know where I was getting that from. Nothing in print or anything came up with that. And I was so happy to get an email back from her where she said, my grandma always, her dying day, always spoke of him as the love of her life and just said he was so sweet to her. So I was like, okay, that was neat. I kind of was. So it's like, okay, so they made a lot of stupid mistakes, and I go into the details, but 3 of them are eventually tried, and 2 of them get the death sentence. One of them gets 99 years. So they try to get out of it. The one who had dressed as Santa thought the way he would get out of the death sentence was to pretend to be insane. Now, their idea of what insanity was in 1927 is kind of different than now. And he tried to act like religion had made him go insane, so he would be quoting scriptures, and then he pretended to be paralyzed. Well, whatever. It managed to fool the jailers in Eastland, and they got really lax with him to the point where they left his cell open while they were going and doing something else one night, and that's when this huge tussle happened. And I am so grateful to Sheriff Wayne Bradford over in Eastland, Texas, because none of the local historians would talk to me about this because it led to a lynching. And I get it. A lynching is not a point of civic pride. I'm not saying that. But, it is history. And I'm sure you guys, Dan and Teresa, can kind of relate. When you maybe did you ever come across historians who maybe didn't want to discuss stuff? Because I thought,
yes.
Come on, it happened. I'm not glorifying it. I'm not saying, woo, people should lynch people. No.
Yeah.
But you can relate to that. So I was really happy.
Yeah.
I found the local sheriff, Wayne Bradford, he is such a nice man. He kind of created his own museum at the Eastland County Jail. And if you contact him and make an appointment, he will give you a tour. And it was so cool. He because I was having a hard time writing the scene where Santa Claus is tussling with the jailer. And he reenacted it. It's like when you're a kid playing cops and robbers. He reacted it and he goes, okay. But it helped me out because they tussled, they rolled down the stairs together. And this was the coolest part. One part, Sheriff Bradford just points his finger to the ceiling and he goes, pow. And I follow and I look from his finger and there's this bullet hole in the ceiling. I was like,
oh wow.
Yeah. So I had chills. I was like, now I get it. Now I can write that. All right. So now we're up to 1929, November 18th. That's the day that big tussle happened. And he ended up shooting one of the jailers. And the jailer was in the hospital. And he did succumb to his injuries. And that next day, a crowd started to just slowly throughout the day build around that little jail until there were like 1,000 people out there. And as soon as night fell, the jailer was like, you know what, I got to do something about this. The remaining one steps outside to try and calm, go home, everybody. And they are chanting, we want Santa, we want Santa. And they mow right over him, take his keys. They drag poor Marshall Ratliff out. He's in the nude by this time. I don't know how that happened. No one really knows. But they tried to hang him. And just because nothing can ever go right in this story, the first rope broke. And so he's then trying to talk to the crowd. And one of the ironies is that where they hung him was right behind, across from the jail, right behind the Majestic Theater. And guess what was playing at the theater that night was a show called The Noose. So, so they finally do manage to hang Marshall Ratliff. And this is 1929. So what they did was they embalmed him and they sat him in the window of the local furniture store so people could file by and get a good look at him. And until his mom got to town and she was like, come on now. And she talked to the judge. And so at this point, he was taken over to Fort Worth, where he was laid in an unmarked grave at Mount Olivet Cemetery. But as the final irony to this story, as the funeral procession was about to leave the funeral home, guess what should pass by? And I found newspaper articles to this. This isn't just a cute story. an actual holiday parade went by with a Santa Claus, a jolly Santa Claus leading it. And they had the funeral procession had to follow that Santa as they went to the cemetery. So there you have it. That is just one crazy tale. And I got to say, my book it's been perfectly calibrated to fit in most standard stockings, both European and American. And it'll still leave room for candy if you do buy it and put it in a stocking.
And I will say it is a sweet book. It really
I like
is. It's
that.
well done. It's well done. I enjoyed it so much, and I know everybody would. And so, too, let everybody know, again, you have a lot of books for sale, how they can reach you, how they can find your books. And then I want to turn it over again to Dan and Teresa to do the same.
Yeah, so you can just go to my website, tuisnider.com. That's just TUISNIDER.com. Or you can go, there's a link there. If you hit the link, my books, it'll take you. I have books about cemetery symbols and, I don't know. Now I can't think of my other books. I just keep writing books. So, you can go to my website. I also have a YouTube channel where I visit these different graves and dig up the interesting tidbits on them. So there. And Amazon's great too. Yes, Amazon's great.
So, Dan and Teresa, I'm going to put you on the spot again to name out your books so people can write down those names and where they can find them.
Okay. My first book was Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure by Daniel Joseph Duke. That's me. And our second book, written with my sister Teresa, is The Mysterious Life and Faked Death of Jesse James. And both can be found in anywhere books are sold, or our publisher, innertraditions.com.
Perfect. I have
Teresa. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Teresa and Dan and Tui, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It was really fascinating and a lot of fun. And I love the synchronicity, as you said, Tui, about your special segment to tie in with Dan and Teresa's story. That was pretty great. Love it. And audience,
thanks for having us.
We loved it.
At different times, but we love you everywhere you are. And we're going to be with you again next week, again live from WBHM-DB Radio from Birmingham, Alabama. Want to say good night, everybody, and thank you to my guests again. Good night.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting. The best in paranormal talk radio.